Okay, so I guess even the eldritch voices in my head have decided they need a break from Velma's nonsense for a bit, so we're apparently doing this instead. While Scoob was scheduled for a theatrical release in May of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic shut most of those plans down, and Warner Brothers pivoted the release to digital streaming on its original theatrical release date, which is why this movie apparently gets onto the list of movies I have to review. God bless technicalities. Scoob was directed by Tony Cervone with a story and screenplay by Matt Lieberman, E.I. Podell, Jonathan E. Stewart, Adam Stitskill, Jack Donaldson, and Derek Elliott. None of whom have ever had anything to do with writing Scooby-Doo before, as best as I can tell. The goal here was to pretty much reboot the franchise completely for theaters. As such, just about every character was recast, with the exception of Frank Welker as Scooby. Matthew Lillard and Grey DeLisle Griffin expressed disappointment that they weren't asked to reprise their roles, but were largely gracious about the casting changes. Fitting with the sadly now standard Hollywood model, the usual roster of B-list celebrities were cast in the major roles, including Will Forte as Shaggy, Gina Rodriguez as Velma, Amanda Seyfried as Daphne, and Zac Efron as Fred. Additional cast included Mark Wahlberg and Ken Jeong as Blue Falcon and Dynomutt, Tracy Morgan as Captain Caveman, and Jason Isaacs as longtime Hanna-Barbera bad guy Dick Dastardly. Yeah, the choice of characters here should give you a clue as to what the hell this movie is about to do, so let's just get on with it. A big deal was made in the run-up to this movie's release that it would show how the gang first met each other and started mystery solving, but honestly, that's pretty much just the first 10 minutes and really has nothing to do with the plot. Although it is interesting to note that this version of the Scooby mythos has the gang operating out of Venice, California, rather than the usual settings of Coolsville or Crystal Cove. The origin story is pretty basic. Scooby's a stray who meets Shaggy, who's lonely as hell. They become friends, and most relevant to the plot, Shaggy gives Scooby his own collar. This will become important later. On Halloween, they meet Fred, Velma, and Daphne, and wind up finding their first creep in a mask. They decide to keep solving mysteries together, which leads into a fairly creative transition from kids to adults through a recreation of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You opening.
You know we got a mystery to solve, so Scooby-Doo, be ready for your act. Don't look back. And Scooby-Doo, if you come through, you're gonna have yourself a Scooby snack. That's a fact.
Credit where it's due, I actually missed the reuse of the theme song in these movies, and it's a really good cover by Best Coast as well. Anyway, we rejoin the gang, now in their 20s, making big plans for the future, namely looking to turn Mystery Inc. from a hobby into an actual business.
Do you mean like carry a briefcase and wear a tie and pay taxes?
Let's get this out of the way right now. I do not like Will Forte as Shaggy. Now granted, very few people can do Shaggy as well as Casey Kasem because it was largely his natural voice, but there are a few actors and comedians who come close, Matthew Lillard included. Will Forte, on the other hand, doesn't get anywhere near it, nor does he include a lot of the vocal tics and laughs that Shaggy is known for. There is more to Shaggy's voice than just an awkwardly high-pitched rasp and excessive use of the word like. As for everybody else, they're fine, but nothing really special, which isn't entirely their fault, given what the story's about to do. Anyway, Velma's found the gang a pointless celebrity cameo, potential investor in Simon Cowell. And here's where we get the first indication the writing team most likely hadn't actually watched any Scooby media in preparation for writing this script, because Cowell characterizes the gang completely wrong.
Fred, you're the tank, the muscle.
No, he is not. He is the leader and general trap builder in pretty much every version, no matter how much or little of an idiot he is in any given project.
Daphne is the people person, the empath.
Since when? I'll concede Daphne is probably the most socially savvy among the gang, especially in the current era, but empathic? Might be going a bit too far there.
And Velma's got the smarts and technical savvy.
Alright, this one's actually correct, but even so, it seems really reductive. And of course, Cowl hates Shaggy and Scooby.
I can't invest with these two involved.
Now, granted, one of the movie's themes is basically disproving all of Cowl's characterizations of the gang, especially Shaggy and Scooby, and I get the writers trying to update the gang for a modern era, but just this one scene made me think, oh great, they didn't actually watch the show or the recent movies and are just writing the gang based on what they think they were like on the show. Now, admittedly, that's just my opinion, and I have no evidence that that was actually the case, but this scene isn't exactly encouraging. And neither is a lot of what's about to come. Rightfully offended, Shaggy and Scooby leave the diner and head for the local bowling alley, where something strange happens.
Yes!
Balls are returned to each lane, which, in addition to the pins, turn out to be transforming robots. These are the Rottens, and basically, they're Warner Brothers' attempt to make their own version of the Minions. Exhibit A. So after another admittedly pretty good round of Shaggy and Scooby put on costumes and annoy the monster, they escape down one of the alleys and into the back of the building. Meanwhile, Fred, Daphne, and Velma hear a police report about the chaos at the bowling alley and head out to rescue the boys. Speaking of, the boys get out of the bowling alley into an actual alley, which they quickly find themselves trapped in.
Looks like this is goodbye, old buddy.
I never saw Paris.
Normally I'd argue that yes, you have Scoob several times, but we're going to let that go since this is pretty much its own universe with its own continuity. So, moving on. Before the Rottens can attack the boys, they get beamed up by what seems to be a UFO. Hugh Jackman's head flying by into space. I don't know. Before the Rottens can attack the boys, they get beamed up by what seems to be a UFO. It isn't a UFO, but instead the command ship of the Blue Falcon, the Falcon Fury. And continuing the seemingly breakneck pace of this movie, the boys quickly meet the Fury's pilot, Dee Dee Skies, who informs them that the Rottens work for Dick Dastardly, and for some reason he's targeting Scooby. And let me get ahead of my fellow nitpickers right now, I researched this. Yes, Dee Dee is the character seen in Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, and while some printed sources have given her last name as Sykes, in the episode The Fur Freight Fright, we meet Dee Dee's uncle, and the name on his truck clearly reads Sky's Furs. So yeah, either could be possible, it's 70s era Hanna-Barbera, and nobody really cared, and there's other more important differences to talk about here. Like the fact that Blue Falcon and Dynamite's personalities have completely changed.
Where are my balloons, Dee Dee? When I say Falcon Fury, that's supposed to cue the balloons.
Keith, what is the deal up there, man?
Allow me to introduce you to Blue Falcon's large adult son, Brian.
Radley Crown, the original Blue Falcon, has retired and turned the identity and Dynamite over to his son, Brian. Dynamite is not happy about this and pretty much takes every opportunity to belittle and snark at Brian whenever he gets the chance. Now, to be honest with you, I actually kind of like this change. Sure, Dynamite isn't the screw-up on the team anymore, but with Brian more concerned about his social media clout and fame, it makes sense to make Dynamite the more serious one. Also, with Scooby in the mix, two goofy dogs may have been too much for one movie, so I'm not as against this change as you might think. However, we just do not get a chance to breathe because Dick Dastardly shows up in his own ship in pursuit of Scooby. During the chase, we get another exposition dump, telling the boys and the audience that Dastardly is not only after Scooby, but the three skulls of Cerberus, the legendary guard dog of Hades in Greek mythology. Dastardly already has one skull, and Blue Falcon and company are trying to keep him from getting the other two. No one is sure what he wants them for, or what it has to do with Scooby, but they're sure it can't be good. After escaping from Dastardly, it's decided it would be safer for Shaggy and Scooby to stay with Team Falcon until everything is over. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang question the clerk at the bowling alley, and after some pointed jabs, just in case there's anybody who doesn't get it yet.
Whoever those friends are must be carrying a ton of guilt on their shoulders right about now.
Okay, can you skip the emotional punishment and describe the robots, please?
The clerk gives them what's left of the Red Rotten, which the gang analyzes in the back of the mystery machine. Daphne spots a hair in the inner workings, which Velma uses to get all three of them caught up on the plot.
Quite a rap sheet. It looks like he's wanted for the theft of archaeological artifacts from a dig in Peru. He also stole the genealogical records of a dozen dogs from the Global Kennel Club. And apparently he's been stealing Netflix by using his mother's account.
That is not fair for the rest of us who have to pay for Netflix.
You have to pay for Netflix?
Ah, there we are. Now with a lead, the three head for Dastardly demolition, but the sudden jostling of the van reactivates the Red Rotten, who communicates with Dastardly, who is currently berating the other Rottens, and getting nostalgic.
And I thought my last sidekick was worthless. At least he had a backbone. And fur for a wet nose.
Yeah, if you're a Hanna-Barbera fan, you may have noticed one particular character missing from this dynamic so far. We'll get there, don't worry. After Dastardly replaces the Yellow Rotten's head with a dustbuster, we go back to the Falcon Fury, where, thanks to Scooby and Shaggy putting jalapenos in their ice cream, Dynamite and Dee Dee get the idea to search for the skulls using their heat signatures, finding one in the Gobi Desert. However...
Incorrect. I just found out where the skull is, and it's not in the Gobi Desert. It's in Romania.
When asked how he knows, Brian says he received a direct message from an anonymous user saying that the skull is in Romania. And when Dee Dee points out it could be a trap...
If it was a trap, why would Anonymous use his own name?
I'm going to do this exactly once, otherwise the counter will likely break the whole video if I keep track of all these moments. Brian pulls rank on Dee Dee and the group head for Romania. Meanwhile, back with the rest of the gang, Velma is analyzing the dog genealogy data Dastardly was interested in.
I've built a sequencing program to cross-match the biographical data that Dastardly stole from the canine registry against Scooby-Doo.
Good thing I'm the tank, because I could not do any of that.
Velma discovers that Scooby is a descendant of Peritas, Alexander the Great's dog. The Red Rotten continues to monitor them as Fred takes a shortcut to Dastardly demolition. The Falcon crew arrives in Romania with the location of the skull being, where else, a creepy abandoned amusement park. It is, of course, a trap. And Dastardly sends out the Rottens to deal with everyone. Oh, and one more thing.
You dim-witted do-gooders! I've already retrieved the second skull from the Gobi Desert.
Shaggy and Scooby hide out in an Easter egg-filled arcade and take out a Rotten that happens to be hiding in the whack-a-mole game before Dastardly shows up and explains himself.
I don't care about you. You're not remotely important. It's the dog I need.
Dastardly blasts Shaggy, sending him flying into the Ferris wheel before chasing after Scooby into the funhouse. Dastardly tries to convince Scooby to come with him willingly. And of course, this is also where we have the scene the internet memed into the ground even before the movie came out.
Dick! Dick!
There, I brought it up. Let's move on. Shaggy and Brian, who is hiding in the Ferris wheel, manage to set the damn thing free to roll through the park when Shaggy fails to throw a Falcon bomb at the Rottens. Dynamite rescues Scooby from Dastardly, and essentially more amusement park mayhem happens until Dee Dee manages to drag the four of them back into the Falcon Fury. Brian immediately starts fawning Scooby with attention after learning Dastardly is after him specifically. Back at the park, the Red Rotten calls Dastardly and sends him the location of the rest of the gang. Brian tries to tailor Scooby a hero suit, but his dog collar is interfering with the process. Told you this was going to be important later. Scooby lets the robot arms take the color, which of course doesn't make Shaggy happy, a mood which is not improved by Brian being terrible at empathy.
Point is, I got you something too. Keith, give it to me. My Blue Falcon Confidence Pack retails for $99.95. You got your Blue Falcon Nutrition Guide, Blue Falcon Resistance Bands, a copy of my dad's autobiography, No Falcon Around, and my lighthearted follow-up, Just Falcon Around.
Yeah, we're doing the whole one best friend is jealous of the other thing. Again. I'm not going to focus too much on this. If you're over the age of 6, you've seen this subplot before and you know exactly how it's going to play out. So let's go to the rest of the gang, where they find themselves missing the boys, but Velma's phone gets a notification with one of Brian's selfies with them, so they at least know they're okay and where they are. But that relief is short-lived when they get pulled over by a ridiculously hot highway patrol cop who turns out to be Dastardly in disguise. He captures the rest of the gang and the van. Back on the Falcon Fury, Shaggy gets passive-aggressive before we cut right back to Dastardly's ship, where Daphne makes friends with the Yellow Rotten who lets the three of them out of their holding cell. They find Dastardly, who uses the 2 skulls he has to locate the third.
Perfect. We have it. Set a course for Messick Mountain.
Okay, this is actually a really good Easter egg. The late Don Messick was a regular Hanna-Barbera voice actor, and most relevant here, the original voice of Scooby-Doo. There's several other Easter eggs here and there homaging the other original Scooby voice actors as well. With a little help from the Yellow Rotten, Fred, Velma, and Daphne get into the communications room, where Velma tries to contact Blue Falcon, and winds up hacking into Dynamite instead.
My name is Velma Tinkley.
Who names her kid Velma?
Velma manages to tell Dee Dee that they're heading for Messick Mountain before her link with Dynamite collapses.
That was unpleasant.
Fred finds a large conspiracy board on the wall and notices a drawing which looks like a lock.
The gates to the Underworld.
From this, Velma figures out Dastardly's plan. Alexander the Great, after conquering the world, hid his riches in the Underworld and created the gate to defend them. Only Alexander, Peritas, or one of their descendants can open the lock, which means Dastardly needs the skulls to find the gates and Scooby to open the lock. And the situation is so dire, it marks one of the few times an unedited but mild curse word gets used in this franchise.
So what? What happens then?
Then all hell breaks loose. Literally. There's more than treasure behind those gates.
The gang also finds a shrine to Muttley, but are interrupted when Dastardly discovers them. Fred quickly pockets the drawing of the lock and then triggers the counter.
Have no right to be in here, mystery morons.
It's Mystery Inc.
Yeah, Fred. He knows.
We then find out exactly what happened to Muttley. Dastardly created a backdoor into the Underworld, sent Muttley through to grab the treasure, but the portal apparently only worked in one direction, trapping Muttley there, where he was attacked by an unknown assailant, which resulted in the portal collapsing. But this moment of openness doesn't last, as Dastardly orders the Rottens to take them back to their cell. Well, almost all of them.
Poor man's Hemsworth stays with me.
How dare you? Wait, Chris or Liam?
What are you doing with...
Gee, there's a joke that won't eventually age badly. Meanwhile, the Falcon team arrives at Messick Mountain and discovers a lost prehistoric world inside. And when they land, we get the stupid argument that's been brewing between Shaggy and Scooby for the last 20 minutes.
You're not the key. You're my best friend. At least I thought you were until you whipped off your collar.
My collar? You gave me the rod.
But I didn't think you'd really do it.
Just come with us.
Us? You're an us now? Well, what happened to us?
Scooby goes off with Brian, Dee Dee, and Dynamite, leaving Shaggy on the ship. Brian commiserates with them, saying he's having a similar issue with Dynamite always writing him for not being like his dad. Scooby starts sniffing around for the skull before finding our next Hanna-Barbera alumni.
Hello? Your tiny little brains probably can't understand me. So, I will speak slowly.
Okay, look, I can get what they're going for here. They're trying to get away from the dumb primitive archetype that Captain Caveman originally was.
Me better watch truck while here, Strange. Me check him out.
But if they were going to do this, they need to get somebody other than Tracy Morgan to do it. You can tell he's not even trying to perform here. It's just Tracy Morgan's voice coming out of Captain Caveman's mouth. There's no personality here, just, hey look, we got Tracy Morgan. We're hip. And add insult to injury, there's a poop joke.
But if you get some on you, rub it in. It's just like lotion.
Back on the Falcon Fury, Shaggy recovers Scooby's collar and starts feeling like the jerk that he is, before Fred suddenly shows up in the Mystery Machine. Again, I'm not going to play coy with this because the movie doesn't either. It's Dastardly in disguise, who convinces Shaggy to take him to Scooby. Meanwhile, Captain Caveman brings Scooby and Brian to the skull, but won't let them take it unless they can defeat him in combat. Brian decides to be a jerk and quickly learns who he's dealing with. Again, not crazy about Tracy Morgan's performance, but I will give him points for getting the cadence of the Captain Caveman battle cry right, because rarely is it done correctly whenever modern productions try to use it. I'm also not taking points off for not sounding like Mel Blanc's original version, because no one has been able to do Mel Blanc's Captain Caveman voice since he passed away.
Captain Caveman!
Brian gets his ass kicked just in time for Dynamite and Dee Dee to see it happen. Scooby tries using the gadgets in his suit to take KV on, but of course, he fails. Dynamite goes for the skull, while Dee Dee keeps KV busy. But everything is interrupted when Shaggy and Dastardly show up. Dastardly drops the disguise, captures Scooby in the skull, and drops the real Fred, Velma, and Daphne into the arena. They're saved, but Dastardly flies off, taunting them that he's headed for Athens, and as we quickly find out, he's also destroyed the Falcon Fury. So after the usual nonsense of the gang and the Falcon team yelling at each other, and Shaggy making the obligatory maudlin friendship is magic speech we've seen many times in stories like this, we go to Athens, where Dastardly arrives with the skulls and Scooby. The skulls not only reform the gates to the Underworld, but restore the ancient ruins of Athens to their former glory. But we have no time to marvel at this, as the rest of our heroes showed up, having bolted the still intact thrusters of the Falcon Fury to the Mystery Machine. Dastardly orders the Rottens to fire on the van, but the yellow Rotten intervenes, and while he doesn't prevent the red Rotten from firing, he does screw up the aim enough that the missile only blows the thrusters off the van. Dynamite attempts to cushion their landing, but whether it's successful or not we don't see just yet, aside from a massive fireball seen from Dastardly and Scooby's perspective. Dastardly shoves Scooby's paw into the lock of the gates, opening them and unleashing the ghost of Cerberus.
Uh-oh! Little more than I'd bargained for!
Yeah, no shit, Dick. Scooby rushes to the van where he finds everyone alive and okay, even Daphne, much to the yellow Rotten's delight. Unfortunately, the van is a total loss, much to Fred's dismay. While Cerberus rampages through Athens, Dastardly heads into the Underworld where he's finally reunited with Muttley.
You cantankerous kid-eye! How could you do that to me? Stop! I'm not joking! Stop! Oh, I can't stay bad! You're alive!
This is actually a pretty touching scene, and is also the point where, if you're paying attention, you realize this is a story about the relationship between three boys and their dogs, Shaggy and Scooby, Brian and Dynamite, and Dastardly and Muttley. And while two of these story arcs are more or less resolved, there's one more to deal with, along with the rampaging monster. Except the gang is still missing Fred. The gang splits up when Brian runs off in terror with Dee Dee and Dynamite going after him. Fred and Velma head for the gate to try to figure out how to close it, while Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne try to distract Cerberus with a couple of spare Scooby snacks Daphne has on her.
Scooby?
I'm so weak.
Dynamite tries to save them, but gets backhanded into a column for his trouble. The yellow Rotten takes command of the others and sends them to attack Cerberus. Again, this fails, but hey, he gets a kiss for his trouble. Dynamite comes to and finds Brian trying to call his dad. He gives Brian the usual pep talk and they finally get on the same page. Am I rushing through this? Yes. But honestly, the movie does this too. This whole speech lasts about 45 seconds before everybody's back into the fray. At the gates, Daphne meets up with Fred and Velma just as Dastardly and Muttley make a break for it with as much treasure as they can carry, and Fred finally makes himself useful.
I wish I had that clue from Dastardly's ship.
You mean this thing?
The sketch has a riddle on the back which Velma manages to solve. One can open the gate, but it requires both the dog and its owner to lock it.
But there's a catch.
Meanwhile, Shaggy and Scooby get the Rottens to turn back into bowling balls who roll toward the gate, while Brian manages to distract Cerberus in such a way that the ghost dog lands on the Rottens and begins to slip, ultimately crashing back through the gates into the Underworld. Team Falcon closes the gate, while Velma and Daphne reveal the catch to Shaggy and Scooby.
One of you has to hold the gates shut here,
While one of you locks them from inside the Underworld.
Since Scooby is the descendant of Peritas, he volunteers to close the gate from inside the Underworld, but of course Shaggy sacrifices himself instead, allowing Scooby to stay. Scooby locks the gate, reverting everything back to normal, and everyone reflects on Shaggy being gone, which lasts for all of 1 minute because Shaggy gets spit right back out of the Underworld because this is Greek mythology we're dealing with, and why not a Deus Ex Machina to get him back? So, everybody's reunited, and the Rottens helpfully grab Dastardly and Muttley and bring them back. Which leads to the reveal. Wait, what?
Simon Cowell?
Well, this makes no damn sense.
Dick Dastardly? Drat! No one ever goes for the double unmasking.
Okay, so this whole thing can be interpreted two ways. One, it's just a gag to call back to Cowell's earlier cameo. Or two, Cowell at the beginning of the movie was actually Dastardly in disguise, working to separate the gang in order to go after Scooby at the bowling alley. Either way, it's really dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant. No! It's just dumb.
And so, back in Venice, Mystery Inc. celebrates their grand opening as an official business, and Team Falcon helpfully supply a brand new mystery machine, just in time for them to get their next case, before we go to the closing credits, which starts setting up other movies it's unlikely we're ever going to see. Okay, so let's be upfront about this. Scoob isn't a bad movie. It's fun, it's got some good jokes, and some really good animation. Will Forte aside, most of the cast does their jobs well. Frank Welker can obviously do Scooby in his sleep at this point, and Jason Isaacs really understood the assignment as Dick Dastardly. The problem is that Scoob is not actually a Scooby-Doo movie. It has none of the hallmarks of a Scooby-Doo story. The gang is pretty much separated through most of it, and as mentioned, it feels like it was written by people who haven't actually watched any of the cartoons they're using as source material, except maybe 1 or 2 episodes and relying more on what they think these characters were like. Everyone except Scooby seems like a Funhouse Mirror version of themselves where the gang is concerned, or way out of character like Captain Caveman. We can give a pass to the Blue Falcon Dynamite dynamic given their specific situation, but otherwise everything seems really off. And the real problem is, much like the DC Extended Universe, it seems that Warner Brothers was so desperate to have a cinematic universe of its own that this movie seems more like an exercise in reminding everyone of other stuff Hanna-Barbera did, rather than trying to do a decent animated theatrical Scooby-Doo movie. It's using Scooby and the gang to get people to watch, but it's not really delivering on what's being advertised, being more concerned with Easter eggs and cameos. It's putting the cart before the horse and trying to establish the universe before focusing on character or story. And as I mentioned, it moves almost too fast, seemingly afraid to let any scene run too long for fear of losing the audience's attention and undermining any genuine emotion it might engender them in the process. All that said, again, this isn't a bad movie, and there's certainly worse ways to spend 90 minutes. So if you haven't seen it before, give it a watch, because it's unlikely we'll be returning to this version of Scooby-Doo anytime soon, given that its prequel, Scoob! Holiday Haunt, despite being finished and ready to go, was famously shelved by Warner Brothers for a tax write-off, which just gives you another reason to think Warner Brothers outright sucks these days. And with that, we seal away another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Let's Scooby-Dooby do it!
Those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away. Don't try to stop them. When monsters all disappear without a trace, the kids find the clues right away. The villains never learn that crime doesn't pay, and they'll regret what they did. And they'll be sorry. If they were lucky, they'd have gotten away. If it wasn't for those meddling kids. Glowing eyes and fangs are pretty scary. Everyone